Gas prices. I know, don't get mad. Energy prices. This war in Iran is teaching the general public language they had never heard before because everything in our country runs on energy and we can see the prices in our own lives. I mean, who had heard of the Strait of Hormuz before except those of us in the energy sector? I mean, really, suddenly we can find it on a map. Wow. The gas pump is obviously the most visible, but there's also electricity prices. I heard somebody say yesterday on the news that their mother's electric bill skyrocketed from $150 a month to $500 a month. I mean, this is crazy, people. What's really going on in the state of the energy sector today? You might be surprised. How are renewables doing? I think that might surprise you too. So today we're going to find out the reality from the author of a new report on the energy sector by energy experts. So grab a pen and notepad or tablet to take notes and listen up. Welcome to Electric Ladies Podcast. We share stories, insights, tips, and advice from remarkably innovative women working on the front lines of corporate responsibility, energy, sustainability, and ESG related issues. I'm your host, Joan Michelson. We talk about innovation, leadership, technologies, and careers, always bringing a new perspective. Find us anywhere you like to listen to podcasts on our website, electricladiespodcast.com, and through my articles as well, including in Forbes. Please pass it on to your friends and leave us a 5-star review if you're so inclined. It helps other people find us. If you are at an inflection point yourself, looking for support with your ESG work or your career, please, please, please reach out to us, especially in this crazy time of flux. There are also a lot of opportunities, and your talents are valuable. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn at Joan Michelson. Tell me you're a listener, and we can help you no matter what industry you're in. So, as of now, gas is about $20 a gallon on average across the United States. It's gone up about $1.20 in the last year. Much, much higher for diesel that today's trucks run on to bring us everything from groceries to Amazon goodies, right? We see the news about how the Trump administration's war against Iran has caused oil and gas prices to spike, and Iran closed the vital Strait of Hormuz to fight back, closing off a major thoroughfare for oil and gas transport. Again, how did we know we were going to be talking about the Strait of Hormuz in our lives, right? I mean, it's crazy. But any spikes in oil and gas do not actually tell the whole story. We were on track to reduce oil and gas dependence dramatically with the Inflation Reduction Act, the Infrastructure Act, and the CHIPS and Science Act. But Trump and the Congress defunded a lot of that. But a lot of it is still in place, by the way. So, where is the energy sector really today? And what do we need to watch for besides the end of the war? Let's find out from our top author of the new energy report. I'd like you to meet Lisa Jacobson, president of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, or BCSE. BCSE is a trade association representing all aspects of the energy sector. She's been on Electric Ladies podcast before, so she may sound familiar. Lisa has testified before Congress numerous times, has represented the energy industry before the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. If I went into her entire bio, we'd be here for a week. Prior to her position with BCSE, Lisa was a legislative aide in the Congress, so she knows the ins and outs. She earned her master's degree in international relations from the London School of Economics and Political Science and a bachelor's degree in political science from the University of Vermont. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Lisa Jacobson back to Electric Ladies Podcast. Welcome back, Lisa. Thank you for joining me today.
Joan, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to this so much, not just because what you do for, making energy issues more accessible to people, but what you do to raise up women in our workforce. So it's a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Ditto. So let's start with what's the point of this report? What's the purpose of doing a report on the energy sector? You do this, I think, pretty much every year. You and I have talked about a few. And you partnered with Bloomberg New Energy Finance. So why do this report and how did you develop it?
Sure. Well, I think your intro really laid it right front and center about why we do this report is that, energy policy underpins all aspects of our life, and what's happening in the policy landscape that impacts energy, environment, our economy, is just top of mind for everybody. I had the opportunity to go to Sarah Week a couple of weeks ago and was interested in all the different types of conversations I had. But ones that impressed me most were the ones that started very quickly with, well, energy is now a kitchen table issue in a way it has never
Mhm.
been. But, even as you were discussing your opening, we've been on this path to making energy more active, more visible to the public for the last 25, 30 years. When I started in this field, I think the goal of energy policy was make it invisible, turn the switch on, go do what you need to do with energy, but don't think any more about it. But with, advanced digital technologies and just changes and evolutions in the marketplace, we can have so much more control and we can manage our energy, and we can do that from a corporate perspective, but we can also do that at a household basis. And so we've been already moving towards a place where, maybe one of our barriers as well as our opportunity was just lack of understanding in the public about what they can do with energy and how they can make their lives better. Clearly, right now, we are in a crisis situation on energy in terms of energy prices, even before the conflict with Iran. There's a lot going on in the energy sector, which we're going to discuss. But the whole purpose of the fact book really is to have a factual foundation over time that looks across all energy sectors, in particular in the United States. So we do have some international data in the fact book, but predominantly this is a US based report, so we can see, where are we doing well? Where do we need to have more investment? Where are, the next market movers going to be? All based on historical facts. And what the reason why we chose to work with Bloomberg NEF going back now 14 years ago is because they provide some of the most up-to-date economic information about energy markets, especially in areas that are emerging. So they were the appropriate partner for us. We cover conventional energy, we cover new energy resources, and particularly exciting to me is that we covered the integration of them and how digital technologies are really reshaping not only our whole economy but the energy landscape itself.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, they've been at this a long time too, right? So this report was obviously done before Trump started the Iran war. So, is there anything we should keep in mind as we review some of your findings that might be, as a result due to that fact? I mean, that's a big elephant in the middle of the room. Are there maybe as we go through, if there's any kind of adjustment to the findings or perspective on it that you want to raise? I just think it's important that we say, and by the way, this was
Sure,
done before.
this may be something we want to look at it with a closer lens, but I, I think the directional trends are still the same, but they're kind of living in a world with a tremendous amount of uncertainty and risk that are caused now on top of the other risks we had by the Iran conflict. So I think to some degree, in the context of what your listeners should be thinking about, it's still those same line directional trends. But again, just to go back to Sarah Week, kind of the two big takeaways I had, other than, this is really, hitting the political mindset and the kitchen table in a different way than it has before, is that supply chain risks in our energy system, which were already a big factor in thinking about transitioning to new forms of energy or really utilizing these digital technologies and the digital AI revolution to lower prices in energy and optimize our economy and energy systems. That was a big issue, but certainly puts natural gas and petroleum and other supply chains that are critical to our economy in a much sharper focus. So conventional energy supply chain risks were top of mind for everyone at the conference. But then also, you had still this increased focus on new and emerging energy technologies and AI, and AI in terms of an energy user, but AI in terms of an energy optimizer. So these conversations are happening at once. These developments are happening at once. But I mean, clearly, there's no way we can say that, the last several weeks has not added tremendous risk for investors in the energy sector.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And we'll get to AI in a minute. Um, your report's first finding, no surprise, is that energy demand is rising and so are costs, right? As you're saying. We see that the Trump administration has been pushing fossil fuels and trying to derail clean energy alternatives. But the truth is that business leaders know that they have to think long term and that clean energy can greatly reduce their energy bills as well as their carbon impact. It looks from your report like corporates are diversifying their energy sources, even in the face of that political pressure. So, and even frankly, as AI, the AI monster needs to be fed, right? So, tell us how you see corporates managing their energy today. Where are they getting their energy from in the face of all these competing dynamics?
Right. Well, I mean, on one hand, we could look at the energy mix as a whole. Um, Consumption was up. That is clear. Prices were up, especially and acutely in certain parts of the country, driven in large part by AI data centers, but also, industrial manufacturing and continued increased electricity demand from electric vehicles, from electrification of sectors of the economy. Those things were kind of continuing on. But what's new, I think, when you look at the data, is you can really see the appearance of AI data centers adding that incremental push. So we were already moving towards a posture of energy expansion where we had been, looking at the power sector the last 2 decades really had been flat. And that was the mindset of the market. It was the mindset of policymakers. And we were solving for problems in the construct of we're not going to see a very rapid set of investments, in the energy sector to meet new demand. We may have been transitioning to different resources and capturing, efficiencies, but we were not expecting massive growth quickly tied to our economic competitiveness and national security. But that, certainly if we go back to like January and February before we had the Iran conflict, that's what would have been the mindset is like, wow, we got to get moving. We got to do this in every area that we can. And that's why, you're seeing this mantra like more energy now. We just need more energy. We need as much electrons and as much molecules as we can bring on quickly and efficiently to meet this imperative that we have right now, which is to, keep pace with, AI growth and also keep pace with the needs of businesses and households around the country. So that's, I think, the overlay, that we're in, and certainly going to continue. Corporates, live in that world, right? So they also need the energy to power their businesses, and they need to make sure that they're doing it in the most energy productive manner possible. So if you look at one of the data sets that we have in the fact book, we track energy productivity of the US economy over time. And you will see that over the last 20 years, every year practically, we've had an increase in our energy productivity, which means that, we use less energy for every metric of gross domestic product. So I was not sure what we were going to see. It's been bumpy a little bit, post-COVID, but especially with the changes we were seeing in the policy landscape. And I was just curious to see, would we be able to grow our economy on pace and decouple from energy use? So I think this is extremely important. And we're not alone in North America with this trend. Most major industrialized countries also have had this structural long-term trend. So where we go from here, I think is critical, and the private sector has a role to play. Another area that we look at where you could take a, under the hood, literally, like what's going on in the private sector, you see corporate procurement of clean energy, predominantly renewable energy, but there's fleet investments, there are efficiency improvements in buildings and on campuses underway. So when we looked at the data from 2025 on corporate procurement, it was again, just really strong numbers, growth in that space, but it was a little different than what we'd seen in recent years. It wasn't just solar and wind. There was an interest in 24/7 reliable, clean energy, in particular by the tech industries, which won't, surprise you. But things like nuclear, geothermal, other integrated technologies like solar and storage, looking at, other opportunities in the energy sector to make sure that they are meeting their procurement goals for renewable energy and clean energy, but also getting the power that they need very quickly. So that's kind of an interesting set of dynamics because it's really diversifying the players in the corporate procurement space as it comes to sustainability. So I'm very interested in that. I think all of that's very healthy. I mean, again, back to this mantra, we need more energy now. And there are many technologies that just haven't been getting the play that they should have over the last 10 or 20 years that can keep us, doing right by the environment in terms of air quality and climate change and being affordable. But they just haven't had that market signal, in part because our policies were uneven. We had renewable energy policies at the federal and state level. And at the state level, they were very different. They were patchwork. Some took a very broad view of renewable energy and renewable electricity and gave opportunities and incentives for many different technologies. And some really just focused maybe on one, right? And then at the federal level, we had many decades of very, kind of on and off tax policy in the renewable energy sector. And that could favor technologies that did not have long lead times. So thinking about hydropower or thinking about geothermal or biomass, waste to energy, those take a very long time comparatively to wind and solar to come online. So if you have a tax credit for 2 years, but your licensing process for hydro is seven plus, seven in a good circumstance in recent years, you're not going to be able to use those credits. So it wasn't that the technologies weren't there, that they were not affordable, or that they didn't, provide added value. In some cases, we're talking about renewable technologies that are available 24/7. They're not variable. But they just weren't getting the look by the marketplace because they were not highlighted in the way that others were through policy. So long answer to say that I think it's healthy that the private sector, number one, is still committed to clean energy, and it's for the reasons that you would think it makes economic sense, and especially now where there are these very evident risks. If you have more control of your inputs, that renewable energy in particular starts to look really, really good, whether that be molecules or electrons. I mean, certainly we mentioned diesel prices. I mean, if you could get renewable natural gas that was locally procured with local feedstocks, you're in a different place than you would be if you were reliant perhaps on, the global market for certain energy products. So anyway, these things don't happen quickly. And I don't like to use this, this very sensitive situation, especially today that we are in, to draw immediate near-term conclusions. But I think, as you said, you can't avoid what's obvious. What's obvious is prices are going up. There's volatility in the markets. And if you have to manage that risk, you're going to look at the attributes of all energy technologies at your disposal, and you're going to make decisions based on that. So things that we've known about energy efficiency, if you're more efficient, you don't even need that, let's start there. Let's make ourselves as tight and efficient as possible. And then, you look at hopefully a diversified portfolio of energy resources for your business, because you can't rely on any one thing, and you need to have that balance. And I think that's the other thing, zooming back out to our energy system in our country as a whole, we are much more diversified than we have been in many years.
Hmm.
And that not just in the renewable sector, but across the board. And I think that's very healthy. And we need to be looking for that balanced, diverse portfolio of resources, including the demand side opportunities, not just on the supply side. We got to bring those two together, look at the demand side and the supply side.
Well, that's really helpful and really insightful. Yeah, and the demand side is interesting. We'll talk about that in a minute around some innovations. But by the way, you mentioned nuclear inefficiency and geothermal, which of course all I've covered. But I just interviewed Maria Korsnick, who's president, as you know, or CEO of the Nuclear Energy Institute. And she said, it's like, now is the moment for nuclear energy, right? When I asked her for career advice, she said, join the nuclear power industry.
Right. Well, I mean, definitely, the market is focused on that. And we, is again that mantra. We'll say it. How many times do we say it? Now I'm on number 3. We need more energy now. And obviously
Right.
the work that she is doing under her leadership is really important to align, a lot of the policy frameworks, the research and development dollars, and also working on, advanced nuclear and these new partnerships that are emerging. I mean, I think that's the other interesting thing that you don't necessarily see yet in the fact book is that, but you see little bits of it, especially on the corporate procurement side. But okay, the paradigm is we need to move fast. We need to move with the lowest cost we can. We need to keep environmental safeguards in mind. Now, what are we going to do? We don't have, we're not going to be able to wait around for the policy and regulatory frameworks to catch up with us. What can we do that's innovative on our own to meet our short-term needs? And we're seeing that happen with the whole behind the meter project announcements, whether that be microgrids with load, or these announcements that were made in the last couple of years on nuclear. Those are longer term, but those are private sector led initiatives, and that's really exciting to me.
No, for sure, for sure. And the mini ones are come to operation sooner. All of this needs the grid to work. Funny how that works. So I saw in your report you said, quote, grid enhancing technologies are emerging as a fast, cost-effective response to meet expanding nuclear power generation and surging electricity demand, and that the investment grew to a record $11.5 billion, which is kind of amazing. Um, Grids in this country are really in desperate need of, frankly, new ones. It's funny, I was on a hike the other day and all of a sudden I ran into these big electric towers and I said to the people with me, what would happen if these were underground? So how stable are the grids? It's not just one, actually, in the United States. And what cool new innovations, like you talked about grid enhancing technologies, what are some of these cool grid enhancing technologies? What's making it more reliable, more stable? I mean, we're going to have more climate events and worse ones, and we got to deal with this. So, on top of the demand is higher with our economy becoming more and more electrified, the dangers to the grid are getting more intensifying. So what's cool? How is the grid and what's coming up to protect it or new now in
Well,
place to
let me
protect it?
start by where you started, which was okay, let's look at what we're investing in. We had $378 billion of, as Bloomberg NEF qualifies it, energy transition investment, which includes electrical equipment and grid investments, but it includes energy storage, it includes renewables, it includes, we can go on. Check it out. Check out the fact book. It is available for free on the Business Council for Sustainable Energy's website. So take a look at that data set. But what was our call out for this year was what was going on with grids. That was the new news in terms of our investment. Renewables was down. And to some degree, you can normalize that and say, okay, well, output, renewable energy, in particular, solar had a very strong year. Solar and storage, broke records. in terms of new capacity additions on the grid. So you maybe say, okay, we don't need as many dollars to get as far as we need to go with renewables, but nonetheless, it was down. And we can speculate why, I mean, actually, probably not even that much speculation. We could say why. There's a lot of uncertainty. And it caused delays in projects, and it's still causing delays in projects. But back to grids. So grids, okay, wow, that like big growth here. And why is that? Well, because consumption went up. We also, supply was provided to meet demand, and we need more electrical equipment for that. Some of the basic things, but then also some of these newer areas like, what can we do to get the most out of the grid that we have today while we are still working to move forward and expand and modernize the grid? So we need to expand transmission in this country. We definitely do. But if we can get more investment in technologies that are proven that will improve the efficiency of the grid we have right now, we should be doing that. And that's what that bucket of grid enhancing technologies are. But there's also technologies like reconductoring, which is more of, I would call, like the modernization of the grid, where without wholesale massive structural change to the infrastructure, we can provide new service and expanded capacity on those lines. And we need to be doing that. The barrier before, it was very hard to find the aligned incentives to have that modernization paid for. And so right now, I think in particular, public utility commissions, states are looking at what they can do in the short term, both to kind of try to put downward pressure on prices and also make sure they're meeting demand. And given, again, you look across that landscape of this diverse portfolio, there's certain things that can move more quickly. And these are some of the technologies that we can do that, provided that the equipment is available and we have the workers to do it. So those are some big caveats, but definitely they are on a different timeline as other options. So I think that is also really helpful and a good development of the last year, that they're getting much more attention and they're getting investment dollars. And I think we're going to see that over the next 2 to 5 years, a lot more real projects happening. Yeah, I mean, there's also things like undergrounding for resilience. I mean, another data set, which again, just continues to astonish me, is $800 billion we spent as an economy last year on natural disasters and climate related events. What are communities doing? What is contributing to the rise in electricity bills for consumers? It is a lot of that infrastructure that has to be rebuilt, or it's other wildlife protection or wildfire protection mitigation plans. It's addressing both grids that are damaged, but ways to undergrounding of grids. I mean, these investments have to happen irrespective of whether our load is growing or not. So it's a confluence of a lot of different events. But I think, again, as you said, it's making it front and center for policymakers, front and center for the public, and hopefully the public and the policymakers can align on some good progress to move forward.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I saw that number on the climate effects, and it's really too bad that that NOAA is no longer allowed to collect that data, but there are some very intrepid, interesting groups that are collecting all that data anyway. So we'll have it and keep it safe and sound. Um, you mentioned the unpredictability of policies and all of that, and you and I can go into it from chapter and verse, from the swings of the Inflation Reduction Act to the swings of negotiating permitting to the swings of the tariffs. And the courts are putting some of these things back in, and they take I mean, it's insane. So how you talked a little bit about this, but I want to just put a little bit of a pin in it and further, because it's important for people to understand we are in an election year, and we are voting for people who can take a stand and can speak for us in Congress and in their state houses and governorships. So what we tame this unpredictability beast? It's not just a matter of who's in the White House, I don't think, but how do we elect people who are going to not to bring some stability? I mean, what do we need to look for? Maybe is a question of what we have to have some agency as the public, as business people. How can we tame this unpredictability? What's in our power?
Well, I think number one, as you said, being aware and actually asking questions of your policymakers, whether it, be going to the town hall where your member of Congress or a candidate is, or, just, now everything's digital too. So you can drop in, you can DM somebody, you can, ask questions to staff, whatever you might do. So be aware. Number one is being aware. Um, and, it's not an easy answer to say, well, what would the answer be, from that policymaker? Because this is complex. So I guess I would be careful of anybody who just gives you an easy answer, because there is no easy answer here. This is fragmented. And there are, let's look at it on a positive side. There are a lot of answers, but they require, as you said, having a mid to long-term view and a focus on, tamping down the heat on energy issues. Like, we've just got to get back to a place where people can have confidence that if they're making long-term investments, that, they're not going to be just arbitrarily disrupted. And that is not new to the Trump administration. Others could argue the same. So going back to like kind of maybe a discrete thing to be looking out for is policymakers that talk about investment and energy project certainty, a technology neutral assurance that if we're going to make a major investment in infrastructure in our country, for our economy, for our national security, for communities, that we will be able to progress on a timely manner in that, and that we will not be arbitrarily changing things based on political priorities. So I think someone who's nuanced enough to understand that is occurring now, and that is not good for our economy. And it's not good for any sector. If you see that in the energy sector, it doesn't give me confidence in another industry. I think it's damaging to investment for our entire country. So that's like one discrete element of it. So looking to see if we can get permitting legislation. The federal conversation on permitting and siting reform has been going on also for decades. And maybe we had the luxury of that when we were in a period of, slower pace of energy growth. But I mean, we're not in that situation now. And I would argue that was not serving us well, because we had a less efficient, less modern energy system. So it would have been better if we could move forward faster then as well. But now it's right in front of our face. We've got to be able to move forward with building infrastructure in our country, and energy infrastructure in particular. They can't be decades long affair. Like, I was on a call earlier today, and I haven't heard anybody say this. I bet somebody else said it other than this individual, but like, they were talking about how, some of the proposals, are now either, able to drive or able to drink. Like, we've been working on, that someone's 18 or they're 21. Like, these are things we've been working on for a long, long time. And that's just not acceptable. So politicians or policymakers that are interested in finding bipartisan, durable solutions so that we can build infrastructure in this country, and who would be willing to put their neck out at the local level to support that. I think it's not just about saying it in a silo. This is, it goes from the bottom up to the top down. It's not easy to move forward with any new projects in any sector in our country right now. I mean, the public, rightly so, is skeptical, and they need to be convinced that if something's going to come into their community, it's going to benefit them. And, certainly energy sector, market participants have a role to play there, and they should be thinking upfront and authentically about what they can bring to a community if they'd like to build in a community. So policymakers at all levels need to align and collaborate and communicate across their jurisdictions, but also, having that communication with the private sector. I'm seeing that happen. I mean, so that's the positive side of the last several years. As I was saying, the need for speed has, made certain things more possible than they might have seen seemed to be several years ago in terms of the private sector stepping up and saying, okay, let's come up with some new creative ways we can work around some of the obstacles we face to move forward quickly.
Yeah, no doubt. And permitting, who's going to be willing to take action on permitting reform and all of that. I mean, people are showing up at town hall meetings like never before. So it's very encouraging. I want to bust a couple of myths that people have. I did see you mentioned that renewables were down, but actually it looked like in your report like they grew a certain amount. You said renewable energy share, including wind, solar, biomass, waste to energy, geothermal, and hydropower grew to 26%, rising fastest among all power sources. Obviously, China is leading the way, but you did say that globally sustainable energy investment, I realize that's globally, reached over 2.3 trillion in 2025. So, the US built obviously the most new power generating capacity, 54 gigawatts you quoted of new utility scale generation. But so clear this up, are we increasing renewable energy or is it stagnated? Or because
No,
I
no, no, no.
know
Yeah.
people are still doing it.
No, no. The investment, the
Oh, the
proportional
investment was
investment,
down.
when you looked at the stack of what the US energy transition investment was from year on year, from last year to this year, looking across those categories, renewable energy was down slightly.
Okay.
But no, and that's why I was saying, like, actually, what can you draw from that? I mean, we'd like to see it going up every year, no matter what, but the cost of renewable energy technologies is going down, which is very positive. And so you might not need that dollar from 5 years ago to get the same amount of power that you would get today. So, it's not a one-on-one thing in terms of investment dollars equals, proportion of our generation mix or new capacity build. So yes, the investment proportionally from year on year for renewables went down slightly and grids went up very significantly. So that's what that one point of facts are. But then, as you said, when you look at capacity additions year on year, you look at the proportion of our generation mix, you look at output in the year that we had in 2025, renewables grew in all of those areas. I think the other thing that's new is when you look at capacity additions overall in the power sector, you see this big increase in storage as well. So solar and storage really dominated the field in 2025 in terms of new capacity additions. Places like Texas, California,
Yeah.
other parts of the country, they were the big takeaway headline.
Storage for a minute, because I mean, you can't get there from here without it, right? So, what are the innovations? I mean, I've had Julia Souter on long duration energy storage, and obviously there's 80 million types of batteries coming down the pike. I've seen lithium, obviously lithium ion, but lithium nickel. I mean, I could rattle off a alphabet soup of them. But what are you seeing? What's most promising to you in terms of storage, and what do you see as maybe that can really be a game changer in energy storage?
Well, I think there's some data in the fact book on US manufacturing in the battery sector. So check that out. It just continues to grow. Strong market signal across any circumstance that we need more energy storage. And yes, we would like to have and are working towards having more long duration energy storage, because that's what can provide even greater risk management and also can help, hopefully not to happen, but we have longer disruptions, and we really need, multi-day available storage resources. So we need to be working towards, and globally we are making progress in long duration energy storage as we are in the US marketplace. But I think what's most interesting is what I said before, is that storage is so well integrated now into the mindset of a resilient and reliable and affordable energy product. So if storage and solar, or storage and other resources, are moving together in deals in an accelerated way, which is certainly what we saw last year. That's really important. And then, we talked a lot about policy change. There's a lot of policy change in the energy tax credits enacted by the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. There's a lot of information on that in the fact book, so we don't have to go into all the details. But one of the things that was a bright spot in that is that energy storage has its incentive for the long multi-year duration. So unlike wind and solar, which are, have a range of regulatory issues that we're working towards to implement the new tax credits, they also had their eligibility period dramatically shut down. Energy storage does not have that. And neither does hydro, neither does geothermal. We still have, longstanding advanced manufacturing credits. We still have credits available for hydrogen. We have credits for other CCS. I mean, I can go on. I'm going to miss somebody, so I'm sorry. I don't want to keep listing things because I know I will miss things. But the point is, there were some significant disruptions, but there is long-term tax policy on the books for many really important climate-friendly energy technologies. And when you pair storage with those technologies, if they are intermittent, you have a 24/7 product. So integrating storage and having the long-term credit for storage is really fantastic. And then, we also have a lot of pump storage, right? The pump storage is really the primary energy storage resource we have. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen to expand opportunities for pump storage projects too.
Yeah. One other myth is that EVs are on the decline, and I saw in your report that there's actually been record growth. I mean, I actually, even Hertz is selling them to Uber drivers, which I thought was pretty interesting. I interviewed Paige Motes about that. But talk about how EVs are doing. I mean, it's become a kind of storage, even in
Right.
some ways, feeding to homes, et cetera. But I mean, your report said that electric vehicle sales reached a record 1.6 million vehicles in 2025, a 3.7% higher rate than 2024. Um, they seem to me to be becoming more mainstream, if that's a way to put it. But what are you seeing on the EV side?
Well, I happen to be in Austin, Texas today, and I think anything that's not an EV, with a driver or without a driver, is the minority. No, no, I'm sure that isn't factually correct, but there are many EVs here in the state of Texas, in particular in the large cities. So yeah, I mean, every community is going to probably have different adoption rate, but it's just like anything. Over time, people get socialized to new things. And, again, going back to thinking about climate impacts and, just risk associated with the choices of our infrastructure and, the household choices we make. I'm an EV driver. I'm not really worried about gasoline prices today. That doesn't mean I don't worry about it for others, because we're all in this together. But that's just one thing that's not on my worry list today, because I'm not, going to be needing to, go to the pump anytime soon. I realize that we're still, small comparative to the other vehicle classes out there, but it is growing. I mean, the big story there, which, they had tax credits that were dramatically scaled back, and the last quarter of, full availability was the end of the third quarter of 2025. So there was a big spike in sales then, and it definitely saw the cliff afterwards. I don't know. I mean, you may know more than me, given your background, on what we might expect in 2026 and 2027. But as energy prices go up, people at the kitchen table think about it more, and they look at what's available. And if you went back 5 years ago, we wouldn't have as many models available. They wouldn't be at the prices they're available today. They wouldn't have maybe the leasing option that they have today. Like, there's a lot more offerings out there on the table for people and consumers to think about. I mean, it's about consumer choice. And yeah, I mean, I don't have anything more to say than that. I'm hopeful. I mean, the infrastructure is the other key piece, and we have some data in the fact book about infrastructure investment. And yes, we talked about how slow it is for infrastructure modernization in our economy overall. But, steady state, that money's getting out. It just takes time.
Companies, yeah, companies are investing in it, and I agree. I think that is, especially with the rise in gas prices, it makes people who might have been on the fence about an electric vehicle take a second look at it,
They're
and say,
also
I
really
could.
fun to drive. Now, I don't
And they are fun
represent
to
the
drive.
sector.
They're
So
totally
full
fun to drive.
disclaimer, you know,
Yeah, they are
um,
fun to drive.
so I
So
don't have a stake in that from a professional point of view, but as an interested adopter myself, I've been pleased. So give it a look.
So, yeah, no, I appreciate that. I want to ask you one other thing and then get some career advice from you for our folks. But let's go back to AI for a minute. I mean, it's both a blessing and a curse, right? I mean, obviously, it's an energy consumption monster, but it can also, as you alluded to earlier, increase efficiencies and drive innovations. So talk about the pros and cons of AI and how the sector is really dealing with it and weighing and when to use it. 'Cause it's not an if, it's a when to use it and when not. And obviously, all AI is not created equal. I mean, what we get as Chat GPT on our computers is completely different than what they're using on a grand scale. But dig a little deeper into AI for us on how the energy sector is really looking at the pros and cons of AI in the sector writ large to both develop innovations and make the ones we have, the systems we have more efficient.
Well, I'll go back to my experience at Sarah Week. Was at a session, small roundtable session, and it opened with go around the table with your one word about AI and energy, right? And people said transformational or energy hog or whatever they might say, right? I said inertia breaking because for me, ultimately, we have been frozen in time in terms of a lot of our markets and regulatory policies. And we need to break through, right? And if AI and that the amount of attention, the amount of both challenge and opportunity, the amount of market capital is going to go into expanding that sector, and it needs energy and it needs it fast, and it needs it to be done in a way that is not going to harm communities in the environment, communities on price, communities in disruption. We have a moment here, and that is the opportunity. And so inertia breaking, my hope is it is inertia breaking. The other thing I would say about the conversations about AI at Sarah Week, but we certainly are having conversations about AI and energy as an organization all the time with policymakers. There's so much we just don't know. There's a lot of hype in every direction. And I think started the conversation not saying AI, I said digital technologies. Like that's how we used to talk about it several years ago, because I think about the advancements in infrastructure and building and campus management, right? That many of our member companies have been doing. Some were proprietary systems, some now, maybe taking, advantage of whole new platforms because of AI. But just the ability to, take, just 20th century systems and, rapid fire advance them and improve their efficiency. I mean, it's just there for the taking in a good way. Like, let's do it. Like we should move forward with digital technology. And so anyway, so long and short of it is, I think it's you got to look as with a critical eye to everything in front of you, including AI. And but if we can use it as a positive way to invest in our energy systems and infrastructure for the benefit of people, for the benefit of communities, and to break the logjam we've had on moving forward with needed policies, let's do it.
No, that's great. And manage the downside, the hallucinations and all that crazy stuff too. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. So before I let you go, I like to get career advice for mid-career women. Think about a woman who has at least 10, maybe 15 years of experience. She's got an education. She knows what she's good at from that experience. And she wants to advance in her career, she wants to make money, and she wants to make a difference. And she doesn't believe that there should need to be a trade-off. So what advice would you give to her?
That sometimes the old advice is the best, like reach out, reach out, reach out. And we're in an interesting space, right? Because we are in this in theory, we're an expanding sector, right? And so much new innovation, new technology, new focus on us. We're going to be growing, good time to be in the energy industries. I totally agree with that. But I still see people in that part of their career, struggling to make that next leap. And at the end of the day, it's going to be reaching out to people. And I take a lesson from my recent graduate daughter, she's in the fashion sector. You may have said many things about her in her, adolescence and early adulthood, but I would not say that she was a super networker. Oh my goodness, this young woman is a super networker, and she's just out there all the time using all the technologies that she can, and she is contacting CEOs. She just doesn't have, she's doing it professionally, but she has no inhibitions on that. And it's paying off. It doesn't pay off in one day or 1 month, but it is paying off for her. And like, go, go, go. Yeah. So I think a lot of it is still relationships and putting yourself out there. I think that is key. And certainly I would say to anybody who's listening, like, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I do respond to everybody who reaches out to me. So you can do that. So that's the other thing you can do. Because even though you may be looking for something new, there might be someone reaching out to you. And then, that person might actually be someone who can help you with your ambitions as well over time. So be generous with your time, and, just don't hesitate. Just, do it in your authentic way, be professional, but like, don't say, well, I don't feel comfortable doing that, or, have fear involved on your side. Just go for it. And you just gotta realize that you won't hear from everybody, but that's what life's about, right? The ones that you do hear from are the ones that can change your circumstance. I think that's where my mindset is right now. And so just don't hesitate to reach out.
Love that. And by the way, I've done a lot on sustainable fashion. So if your daughter needs some context, she can let
Thank
me
you.
know.
Yeah.
Sure, sure, sure. Any final thoughts, Lisa, before I let you get back to your life?
Um, yeah, no, I mean, I just think we're in another tumultuous period, as we're recording this, but the fundamentals matter. And, we do have many affordable, clean, efficient, energy technologies at our disposal. And we just got to keep focused on moving forward there, and, meeting people where they are in the energy conversation. I'm sure we're going to have a lot of new entrants to that conversation over the next few years. And, just try to put yourself in their shoes, and, keep an open mind yourself, because ultimately the good news is, if we are going to expand our energy system, clean and efficient energy, I believe, is going to be on the top, because it just meets all this criteria on affordability. It meets it on reliability. It, meets it on innovation. So let's just keep moving forward.
Oh, I love that. I love that. So thank you so much for joining us today on Electric Ladies Podcast, Lika Jacobson of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy. So what do you want to see in the energy mix that powers our economy? How are you going to use your agency? Are you going to look for a job? Are you going to bother your congressional rep in this election season? How are you going to use your influence? Tell us how energy is affecting you. Post it to us on LinkedIn or Twitter or Threads. And yes, I will always call it Twitter at Joan Michelson. Send us any questions there as well. And you may win a complimentary 30-minute session with me. And please subscribe to our mailing list to stay abreast of our amazing guests like Lisa, our articles and career advice. And you can do that on electricladiespodcast.com. Please remember, you are talented, your ambition is a gift. Seize the opportunities that abound even now in this economy at the intersection of energy, sustainability, innovation, and climate. I'm Joan Michelson. Thank you for joining us. See you next time.